Ready, set, go.
Hi everyone, thank you for joining us on Her Art from the Attic today.
Loud.
Is it loud?
Yes.
Sorry. Today we're going to learn how to get fine detail using oil pastels, like you see in this gorilla here. Was that better?
Nope. Let it go.
Now, I ask you to be patient as we go through this tutorial. There will be some parts, as with most art that you do, where you look at it and you think, whoa, that's alarming. I promise you, if you keep persevering and plowing through, the end result will be worth it. Okay, here are the supplies I am going to be using. Sakura Expressionist Crayon Oil Pastels, light blue sturdy construction paper, a blending stick. I'm going to use my Pigma Sensei mechanical pencil for scratching, and then masking tape for a border. But that's optional. Okay, if you have ever used oil pastels, then you may feel how I feel, and that is to get fine detail can be pretty tricky and hard. So I have practiced a few techniques over and over, and I want to present to you what I have found personally very helpful in achieving more detail and finer detail in my oil pastels. So the first thing we're going to do right now is layer various colors. We want to bring in lots of different colors and lots of different layers. The more layers and the more colors you bring in, from my experience, helps you bring in more detail. So I'm going to start with the lighter parts of my picture of this gorilla, and I'm going to lay down a little white where I know I want it to be lighter or highlighted. Now you'll notice as I go through this, creating this piece of this gorilla, that I am constantly changing where I put color and highlights and depth and shadows, and even, and actually a lot, his proportions. So now I'm bringing in my darkest value, which will be black, and I am going to find the places in my gorilla that I know are going to be the darkest in the end, and I'm just going to add basic layers down. Now I've put down some very thin lines, which I'll put down some more and you'll see. And a good way to do this is use the edge of the top of your oil pastel. If you've found that it's rounded because you've been using it to lay down color, then just take a piece of paper and rub it on over and over until it sharpens the end and gives you a nice edge to work with. Now I'm going to start introducing some other colors for my gorilla. And I'm going to start with some vibrant dark blue, and I am beginning with the end in mind. So I know how I want things to move into each other, and I have a pretty good idea of how the colors will work together. This is a good reason to experiment and even test it on a paper before you do it. So I am putting some blue around with the white. Now I'm adding some orange. Now it's looking pretty funky right now, right? Don't give up. If you get to the funky point, it is so tempting to crumple up your paper and toss it in the trash. But just keep going and keep layering. I've used orange and red. And one of the benefits of oil pastels is that they don't dry. So you can keep manipulating the color, you can keep adding layers, you can keep even changing the entire shape of your subject, as you'll see me do over and over with this gorilla. But don't give up. Just work that art until you make it one that you are happy with. What do I always tell my kids? It doesn't matter how good it is. It matters that you did a job that you're proud of. So now I've got my blending stick and I am pushing all of those colors into each other. This is my first basic layer and I want those colors to be smooth. We're going to add more layers after this for more fine detail, but I want my base layer to be colorful, I want it to be smooth, and I want it to be pretty thick with color. So you just work the oil pastels. If you don't have a blending stick, then just use your finger or use a paper towel or a cloth. Now I may lay down a little more color here and there, and then I'll just keep blending. I also want you to observe how when I blend it, I blend the colors following the same strokes that I've already laid down with the oil pastels. You can see I'm very deliberate with my strokes. I know the hair of the gorilla is going to be going this certain way, so I'm going to draw my strokes in that same way. Even though I'm blending those colors together, it will make a difference in the end. It will help all the colors and lines flow together if you use the same shape of strokes everywhere you go. So I left the face to be the last part that I was blending because I wanted to be a little bit more meticulous and be able to focus in on the details. But I'm going to use the same techniques that I did with his head and his fur, and that is I'm just going to bring in color after color, layer upon layer, and then I'm going to blend them for this first step of mine. And when you blend them, you just push the colors into each other until you can't see a definitive line. I am going to speed this up for you and let you just watch the lines and the colors and the layers that I am laying down. And I just want you to observe how the colors blend into each other, how they affect the other hues and balances and values around them. Also, I want you to observe how sometimes I make mistakes, and I left those in the video so you can see how I deal with them. With oil pastels, there's a few things you can do. You could just add more layers and broaden your strokes until it's the shape you want, or if that's not going to work, just rub it off. Rub it off completely, or as much as you can, and then lay more color down and start over in that particular area. You can see on the face I just did it to his mouth right there. I'm wiping it off because it looked wonky. So I needed to fix it. That's what I did. Now you'll notice that I can only rub off the color so much, and I'm losing a little bit of well, not a little bit, I'm losing quite a bit of the vibrancy of the paper underneath. But what I'm going to do as I add layer upon layer of the oil pastels is I'm going to try to reintroduce that color and vibrancy back into his mouth. I'll do the same thing with his eyes because I drew them too close together. At one point he looks like Darth Vader gorilla, but this is actually a good thing to learn. One of the reasons my proportions ended up so funky and wonky is because I had the paper flat on the table. A good way to get better proportions and more accurate proportions is to make the paper, or whatever surface you're drawing on, parallel with your face. Because the second you start to make it unparallel, that's when your perception changes. But I thought that I could beat the system, and I could not. Anyway, I wanted to leave it all in here because I wanted you to see, one, how you can fix your mistakes, and two, how everybody makes mistakes. I've been a professional artist for over 10 years, and I am still making mistakes. But you gotta embrace them. And you've gotta realize, like, ooh, I just learned something. Whether it's about yourself, or about technique, or about discovering something wonderful and new that comes from your mistakes, because I promise that will happen. You've just got to embrace the mistakes. And this is the point in this process where I looked at it and said, that looks so much like a gorilla version of Darth Vader. But you just keep pressing on. Am I right? Okay, now I'm going to tell you about my other secret of getting fine detail with using oil pastels, and that is using the scratch technique. Now, when we think of scratch art, a lot of times we think of a technique for children to use with crayons or oil pastels. But I'm telling you, you can use it in your fine art, your oil pastel fine art, to get beautiful detail. Here's an example for you of another piece I did using the scratch technique. If you can see, I scratched the details of this betta fish, his scales and his face and his eye, all scratched in there after I layered colors and texture, etc. So you can use a skewer or a toothpick. I wanted really fine scratches. I am using this mechanical pencil from my Pigma Sensei pen set made by Sakura. I love that it's super fine and sharp, and I'm using the metal part. I'm not using the actual pencil. And the colors of all the oil pastels you use will show through these lines, as well as the paper underneath. That's one of the reasons I chose a very bright piece of paper to put this on, because I wanted those scratches to be brighter. So as you're picking out your paper, keep that in mind if you plan on utilizing the scratch technique. I've discovered that if I do a quick, hard, swift motion, the lines are much finer and more detailed. But you've got to be really careful to make your movements with purpose so that the lines scratch in the direction and shape that you want them to. And you can still make slow, more deliberate scratches with your pencil or your skewer. It's okay. Okay, now I'm going to rub over some of the scratches that I've laid down, and this will help them just be a little bit more subtle. So now I'm going to speed things up, and you guys just watch where I scratch. I'll add more color, I'll add more layers. So basically, in a nutshell, here's how I'm getting detail. Layers, multiple colors, fine marks with my oil pastel, and scratching. All right, guys, we are done. Thank you so much for joining me on Her Art from the Attic to learn how to get fine detail with Sakura Expressionist oil pastels. I hope you found this helpful. Ooh, the fun part. Let's take the tape off. I just feel like it finishes the piece, don't you? When you pull the tape off and you've got that beautiful border that draws your eye into all of the work you just did. I love it. Anyway, thank you for watching. I hope you have a wonderful day. Don't forget to find Her Art from the Attic on Facebook. I'd love for you to share your projects with me there. Also find Her Art from the Attic on Instagram. If you want to adopt some art from me, jump on my website, herartfromtheattic.com. Goodbye! Why is it echoing? Hang on, I know.
Let it go. Let it go.